absolutely pleased to introduce Jerry Blue. And Jerry is a principal librarian for the Hennepin County Library System, and actually started in the Minneapolis library system in 1976, the year before this building closed.
We are here to bring new life in this building. New life that will provide opportunities for people on the north side. People in our community who need to reach out and embrace the digital divide. To give opportunities for people to learn, because that's what this whole building is about. It started with books. It will continue with technology. And in the future, we don't know what new things it will embrace. But it's providing a continuity from the past to the present to the future. And so we want you to start dialoguing about your memories of what this building meant to you.
I grew up in this area. My paper route was actually from Emerson to at the time Seconds, and then Broadway to Lowry. And I grew up in a family with 4 boys, and we lived with our grandparents on 25th and 6th. And it was a small house, and you know how 4 boys go. We're all about a year apart from each other when you're right down the line. And so it get a little bit crazy when we're all in the house sometimes. And my mother had this habit of sending us someplace and making sure that we went there, and we had to bring back proof. So if we went to church, we had to bring back the bulletin. She sent us to Ascension to go swimming. The swimsuit better be wet. It smelled like chlorine. She would send us to the library, and it was this library. And I remember coming here often, and half the time, you know, to turn in books that were late. But it was. And I remember meeting a librarian down here, and we were looking at books that I might like. And I was in grade school, and I like things like Hercules and Samson, you know, and those epics. And she gave me Homer's Odyssey, which was far and beyond my grade school. So it took me a long time to read that book. I worked on that book. I loved it, and I read it. And so I finished that book, and I remember going, you know, when I went back to school that summer, and I said, "What books did you read?" You know, and I had none, and they'd say, "Homer's Odyssey," and they'd say, "Yeah, right." But it turned me on to reading those books in that section. I spent a lot of time in that section over the next few years reading those books, and so this library was a very special thing for us and for all of us, Dolan boys. And it was, I can still remember the setup coming in here today. It sure seemed a lot bigger. We were smaller, but it's great. I'm glad to see that this grand old building will be something that's useful, and again, useful in the community, and working with as a career center, technology center. We need it. So thanks for everything you're doing. Thanks for having me here, and it's nice to be in here.
I must tell you, my house was built in 1883, and it's right down the block on 22nd and DuPont. And I have all kinds of stories to go with my house, having talked to people that had come there as children, and the research that was done by the city of Minneapolis to find more about my house when it was designated a historic site. So in 1888, students that wanted to go to high school had to go to Central High, which was located over in South Minneapolis on 4th. That was some distance, and there were a couple barriers too. One, according to the information I found, was a creek, and I believe that was Bassett Creek. Back in the day, Bassett Creek was the defining line between the Dakota People's Territory, according to a treaty made in the 50s, The other side belonged to the United States. So Bassett Creek has quite a history. And so in 1888, people had to cross the creek, which I believe was Bassett's. And the other thing was, as the railroads became prominent, there was a barrier in crossing the railroads. There was a man named by Mr. Abernathy who lived over here, and he said, we need a school on the north side. It's a long distance for people to get over to Central High. By the time they get there, it takes them a couple hours. For them to come back home, it takes them a couple of hours. They really don't have time for much else in their life when they're working especially. So he got together with some folks, and back then, the name of the newspaper, town newspaper, was the Minneapolis Chronicle. And one of the people at the Chronicle, I believe was the editor or the owner, said, yeah, I think that's a good idea that we have a school on the north side. Well, why am I talking about the school? Well, because the school was where our library first existed on the north side. As you may know, this is the very first branch library.
We grew up 26 in Emerson, about 6 blocks from here, and
rode our bikes here.
in the
Once a
summer,
week, for sure.
yeah, just
What was this room when you were coming?
We remember more upstairs was the children's library when we came. So we weren't really down in this.
yeah. This was more in
This was an adult section
adults and I
we're in
think
right now?
periodicals, maybe
Mhm.
that kind of thing.
And did they have fires over there in the winter?
You know, I don't
Not many
remember.
fireplaces I know in libraries.
I don't.
I know this is it's a common story, but this is the library we used to come over from north. They used to live.
Right.
And so after school, we'd stop here to do something for some class assignment.
Yeah.
But I remember very clearly, I don't know who it was, but the librarian did not like teenage boys.
Chief Dolan brought up a book and links that book to this place, and he'll never forget that book. What's a book that's from your childhood from here?
The Sue Barton nursing stories.
Are you by any chance a nurse now?
No.
No, but you read into those
No,
nursing
I was
books.
going to be a librarian.
First book was Rocket to Limbo. Science fiction. I remember it because I loved the book, but I also paid a substantial fine.
And here on a summer day, it was so cool and quiet and clean, shining. You know, just
How do you feel about looking at this building now then?
it,
It's much smaller.
It is
We
much
remember
smaller.
it.
It is much
Yeah.
smaller.
I was struck with its beauty outside, but we look at this room and look at some of the details of it, and we see a lot of work to be done.
yeah, yeah. But just to be in here again.
I like Jerry's story though, because he gave us sort of inspiration for not giving up.
Yeah.
I loved the children's library here. It was just great, and sometimes they had story time, and sometimes the kids would wander around and pick out books out of the stacks here. They were elementary age.
Without ever realizing it, there's sort of an anchor point for our communities, and maybe you sort of realize it when you lose them.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right.
Paul here is the architect for the development.
Oh, really? Paul, you've got a lot of work to do.
I do. Cut out for us here.
Paul, can you sum up some of the big things besides what we just see? How is your infrastructure here, like your electrical and water?
Oh, virtually non-existent. We really have to start from scratch with the utilities and the services to bring it up to date.
He named something like 4.2 million, was that it, that you're looking at?
That's the project budget, right? That includes all the various fees and expenses, things like that.
However, I love old buildings, and I think it's worth it.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. These buildings are just the bedrock institutions in the neighborhood, and we have to preserve them. So,
Give me a glimpse, if you would, in words of what we can see in this room. What are you going to do? You can't really give up that fireplace.
no, that's very much integral to the building and will be restored. We have to balance the need to historically preserve the building with the desire to bring it up to current performance standards.
Is this
regard to
designated
energy
historical
consumption.
building?
It is absolutely
That complicates
designated.
everything, doesn't it, for you?
Absolutely, it does. Right. So there are lots of challenges here, lots of opportunities, as we say.